From the moment dawn touched the treetops and spilled soft gold across our valley, I felt the kind of peaceful familiarity that had shaped my life since childhood, the gentle rhythm of a pack that believed in order, unity, and tradition. And though I often wondered if there was something more beyond the borders of our territory, something waiting in the vast forest that stretched far past the cliffs, I always pushed the thought away before it could take root, telling myself that curiosity was a distraction and duty was my compass. So that morning, like so many before it, I walked the worn path that led from my cottage to the training grounds, breathing in the scent of pine sap and damp earth, listening to the comforting sounds of pack members already beginning their routines. Though as I passed beneath the canopy's shadow, I noticed, as I sometimes did, that the forest seemed to exhale differently around me. Pockets of stillness where birdsongs faded too quickly, breezes that touched the hair at the back of my neck as if they carried unspoken messages, and faint howls echoing far beyond the boundaries where any wolf from our pack should have been roaming. I tried to pretend it was nothing more than my imagination, an old habit born from listening to too many stories as a child, the tales the elders used to whisper about lone wolves wandering like restless spirits, ancient guardians lingering between worlds, and one particular legend, the one about a rogue shadowwalker with an eye like burning coal, always struck me in a way I couldn't explain. Yet even as the memory surfaced, I pushed it aside and focused instead on the hum of daily life around me, greeting familiar faces, exchanging small smiles, offering quiet encouragement to younger wolves who still stumbled through their early shifts, despite the duties and expectations weighing on me as the future Luna. Or perhaps because of them, I held tightly to these moments, the small rituals that grounded me. And as I swept stray leaves from the archway of the herb garden, I thought about how predictable everything had always been, how predictable everything was supposed to remain, though beneath that comfort stirred a strange, restless flutter I couldn't define, an odd sense that the world was holding its breath in places I couldn't see. Later, while carrying baskets of herbs toward the healer's lodge, I paused when a familiar sensation brushed against me, the air shifting suddenly, quietly, as if something unseen had drifted just beyond my reach, and I glanced toward the treeline where the shadows pooled thicker than they should at midday, their edges wavering like smoke, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw a glimmer of red deep within the darkness, faint, pulsing, impossibly steady, and though it vanished the instant I focused on it, I knew I hadn't imagined it because my heartbeat quickened in the same peculiar way it had on nights when the distant howls returned, those lonely, low tones, carrying a strange weight that settled deep in my bones. Shaking off the sensation, I reminded myself that strange lights and shifting shadows were common when the clouds passed over the sun or when my mind wandered too far into stories that belonged in the past. Yet even as I reassured myself, I continued to feel the prickle of invisible eyes along my spine, the sensation of being observed without threatened, watched but not hunted, almost as if something in the forest was measuring me, quietly learning me, silently waiting for something I didn't yet understand. I tried to dismiss the thought, throwing myself into work around the grounds, helping mend woven fences, organizing the root cellar, gathering moonflowers for the evening ceremony, telling myself that life was exactly as it always had been, anchored by tradition and surrounded by familiar faces, although as the day stretched on, the unnatural quiet between tasks pressed around me like a soft fog, thinning only when someone spoke directly to me, thickening the moment I turned away. That evening, the pack prepared for a feast to honor the upcoming Luna ceremony, my ceremony, and even as laughter floated through the air and warm lantern light flickered across the courtyard, I felt that odd restlessness again, a feeling that something just beyond sight was shifting, realigning, whispering for my attention. I wandered to the edge of the gathering to escape the bustle and stood beneath the first rising stars, letting the cool air steady my thoughts. But the instant I looked toward the dark line of trees, my breath caught, because between the trunks where moonlight struggled to reach, I spotted a silhouette, a tall, still form, too silent, too perfectly still to be any regular wolf or pack member, and though I could not see the details, I sensed the presence in the same inexplicable way one senses a storm rolling in before the clouds appear. The shape didn't move, didn't step forward, didn't threaten, just watched, and a faint gleam, so subtle I almost doubted it, flashed where an eye should have been, a dim red glow that seemed to flicker in time with my heartbeat. I should have called for a sentinel, should have alerted someone, should have retreated, yet instead I remained perfectly still, caught between fear and a strange pull that felt like recognition, as though I were remembering something I had never lived. Then, without so much as a whisper of movement, the presence dissolved into the dark, leaving not even a rustle of leaves to prove it had been there, and when a breeze drifted past, it carried a scent I couldn't place, wild, cold, and ancient, like stones soaked in moonlight. Unsettled, I returned to the others, though part of me stayed behind with the lingering sensation in the air, trying to understand what I had felt and why it seemed to echo inside me like a half-formed memory. Throughout the night, my thoughts drifted again and again to the shadow in the treeline, the red glimmer. The feeling of being watched with something that wasn't malice but wasn't ordinary either, and though I told no one what I'd seen, I caught myself glancing over my shoulder more times than I cared to admit, expecting the figure to reappear at the corner of my vision, expecting the forest to whisper again, expecting something. When the moon rose fully and painting silver paths across the fields, the unnatural quiet returned, settling across the valley so softly that even the wind seemed hesitant to breathe, and deep within the silence, a distant howl rose, not from any pack wolf I recognized, not from any territory reclaimed, but from far beyond the borders, threaded with a wild melancholy that stirred something deep within my chest, something old and unnameable, as though the sound carried a message meant only for me. I stood frozen beneath the stars, feeling the world narrow to that single echoing call, and for the first time in my life, I felt the distinct sensation of being not just watched, but awaited, as if the one behind those distant howls, the shadow in the trees, the rogue with the red eye from whispered legend, was drawing nearer with every breath I took. When the howl faded, the quiet that followed felt heavier than before, as though the night itself was holding a secret just out of reach. And even as I returned home and closed my door behind me, lighting a single candle to steady my thoughts, I couldn't shake the feeling that my peaceful, predictable life, my world of routine, tradition, and certainty, was standing on the edge of something vast and shifting, something that watched me from the treeline with glowing patience. And though I curled beneath my blankets and tried to fall asleep, the silence pressed against my walls like a held breath, and somewhere far beyond the village, I thought, just for an instant, I saw that same red glimmer flicker through the trees, soft and distant, as if a single eye had opened again in the dark, watching, waiting, promising that the quiet life I clung to was about to unravel in ways I could never have imagined. That night, sleep found me only in fragments, thin and fragile as frost on autumn leaves, and each time I drifted off, I slipped into dreams that felt less like imagination and more like memories borrowed from someone else's life. Dreams where the forest towered impossibly tall and the moon glowed brighter than any lantern, casting pale light on a path I didn't recognize yet somehow knew I was meant to walk. In one dream, I stood in a clearing filled with swirling mist, the air cool and sharp like unspoken truth, and when I looked down, I found a trail of paw prints beside my own footprints, each print larger than any wolf I had ever seen in our pack, the edges glowing faintly red as though lit from beneath, leading deeper into the unknown until everything dissolved again and I woke with a soft gasp, the scent of pine lingering in my room as if the forest itself had followed me home. The next morning, the pack's usual warmth felt off in small, almost imperceptible ways. Conversations hushed when I approached. Familiar smiles tightened at the edges, even the younger wolves who usually swarmed me with eager questions seemed unusually distant, glancing toward the forest with nervous flicks of their ears as though they sensed the same shifting air I had felt. At first, I wondered if it was simply nerves about the approaching Luna ceremony, but the tension threading through the pack didn't feel like nervous excitement, it felt like anticipation, the kind that coils low and silent before a storm, and every time a branch creaked or a bird took flight, half the wolves looked toward the treeline as if expecting something, or someone, to emerge. While helping the healers prepare herbal mixtures, I noticed something strange. The moonflowers, normally slow to open before dusk, had bloomed prematurely, their pale petals glowing faintly even in daylight, and when I brushed a fingertip along one of the blossoms, the petals quivered as though responding to a presence I couldn't see. Later, while gathering firewood near the boundary line, I felt a familiar shift in the air, a subtle drop in temperature, a deepening of shadows, and when I looked up, I saw him again, more clearly this time, no longer just a flicker in the corner of my vision but a full silhouette standing between two ancient pines. Kale, the legendary rogue, his enormous wolf form dark as midnight except for that single crimson eye that glowed with quiet, measured intelligence. Unlike before, he didn't disappear immediately, he simply watched me, motionless, his presence steady and strangely calm, and though every instinct should have driven me to call for help, I stood rooted, feeling no threat from him, only the weight of something unspoken pressing between us. When a gust of wind rustled the branches, he shifted just enough for a sliver of moonlight to catch the faint scars across his shoulder, pale lines that spoke of battles fought far from any pack lands I knew, and the moment my gaze touched them, Cale lowered his head slightly, not in aggression but in a gesture that felt almost like acknowledgement, as though he recognized something in me I didn't yet understand. Then, just as silently, he stepped back into the shadows, but this time he didn't vanish completely. He left something behind, a single feather, dark and smooth, lying in the grass where he had stood. When I approached it, the air hummed faintly, a low vibration that tingled across my fingertips, and I couldn't explain why, but touching that feather filled me with a sudden rush of emotion, sorrow, longing, purpose, so strong I had to steady myself against the nearest tree. I brought the feather back with me, hiding it beneath my cloak, unsure why I felt compelled to keep it, only knowing that it had been placed there intentionally, a message in a language I could not yet read. As the day stretched on, strange coincidences continued to unfold. Whenever I thought about Cale, a distant howl rose in answer from the forest. Whenever doubt clouded my mind, the wind shifted, brushing my cheek like a quiet reassurance. And whenever I questioned whether I had imagined the dreams, another moonflower bloomed early, its petals opening toward me like a silent affirmation. By dusk, even the pack's elders seemed uneasy, exchanging wary glances and sniffing the air as though picking up a scent they couldn't identify, and though no one said it aloud, I sensed that they, too, felt the forest's gaze upon us. During the evening gathering around the fire pits, between the crackling flames and the smells of roasted herbs, I heard whispers, wolves speaking of shadows crossing the hills at dawn, of glowing eyes glimpsed near the old well, of tracks leading toward the eastern border that faded before anyone could follow them. Their voices trembled just slightly, restrained but unmistakably unsettled. When I asked if anyone had seen the rogue wolf the elders once warned us about, silence fell so suddenly it felt like all the heat drained from the air, and one elder finally murmured, "The shadow walker appears only when destiny stirs," before quickly turning away, refusing to say more. That night, sleep avoided me again, and when I finally drifted into another dream, it came sharper than before. I stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking a forest that seemed alive with swirling mist and glowing red embers drifting like fireflies, and beside me, not touching but unmistakably present, stood a massive wolf, Cale, silent, unblinking, his single red eye fixed on a narrow path cutting through the trees, a path illuminated by pale light as if waiting specifically for my feet. When I turned to ask what he wanted from me, the wind carried his answer instead, a whisper that wasn't a voice but a feeling, "Follow." And then I woke with my heart pounding and the inexplicable certainty that the dream had not been mine alone. Determined to clear my thoughts, I stepped outside into the night air, but the moment I did, I froze, because the same feather Cale had left earlier now rested on my doorstep, though I had hidden it inside my drawer before bed. The sight of it lying there so calmly, so deliberately placed, sent a tremor through me, not of fear but of understanding. Cale didn't just appear at random, and these weren't mere coincidences anymore. Each dream, each blooming flower, each shift in the air, each silent visit was a piece of something larger, a pattern forming slowly around me. The forest knew something, Cale knew something, and both seemed intent on leading me toward it. I knelt to pick up the feather, and as my fingers brushed its edge, the breeze sighed through the village with a long, low note that felt almost like a warning or a reminder. And in that moment, everything clicked. The dreams weren't accidental, the pack's tension wasn't coincidence, the unnatural silence wasn't imagined, and Cale's appearances weren't random chance. Each sign, each whisper, each shadow had been guiding me, nudging me, drawing me closer to something unfolding just beyond the horizon of my ordinary life. And as the feather warmed faintly in my palm, a chilling realization settled over me like a final piece falling into place. I was not just being watched, I was being guided, step by step, by an unseen force that had already set my fate in motion long before I became aware of it. Woke before dawn, the air thick with an unease that clung to my skin like cold mist, and for a moment I simply lay there, listening to the strange quiet pressing against the walls of my home as though the forest itself had crept closer during the night. waiting for me to step outside. When I finally gathered the nerve to open the door, the world beyond looked familiar yet subtly wrong. The sky still dark but threaded with streaks of silver as if the moon refused to surrender to morning, the trees still standing but casting shadows in impossible directions, and the wind moving in slow, deliberate currents that felt almost like breath. I walked toward the village center, hoping the routine of dawn preparations would steady me, but the moment I approached, I sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The pack stood in small, tense clusters, voices hushed, shoulders stiff, eyes darting toward the forest as if expecting it to erupt into revelation at any moment. When they noticed me, their murmurs softened even further, a ripple of silence spreading in my wake, and though no one said anything directly, the weight of their stares told me they had felt the same trembling in the air that I had, that something was stirring just beyond the veil of our ordinary world. I moved through them with forced calm, offering brief nods, but their strained expressions followed me like shadows, and the moment I reached the edge of the gathering grounds, I felt it, a presence, powerful and magnetic, stepping into the valley with the certainty of one who knew every eye would turn toward him. At first I thought the sunrise had shifted strangely again, bending itself into a figure, but as he approached, I realized it was no trick of light at all but a man, tall, broad shouldered, every movement deliberate and commanding, his aura layered with something ancient and fierce that hummed through the air like a remembered song. The pack instinctively bowed their heads as he passed, yet their reverence carried an undertone of fear, not because he threatened them but because his very presence rewrote the balance of the world around him. He moved with the kind of confidence that comes from absolute power, the kind that needed no announcement, and when his silver eyes lifted and found mine across the clearing, I felt something inside my chest lurch violently, as though a door I never knew existed had been forced open by a single glance. I wanted to look away, to steady my breathing, to ask who he was, but the answer came to me before anyone spoke. Alpha, not of our pack, but something more, something older, something threaded with the same unsettling energy that had been clinging to me for days. He approached without hurry, the crowd parting for him as if guided by instinct stronger than fear, and when he finally stopped before me, the morning light caught the faint marks across his jaw, scars that looked too clean, too symbolic to be accidents, as if each one had been carved by fate itself. "You've been dreaming," he said softly, not as a question but as a truth he had witnessed alongside me, and though his tone was calm, it held a depth that felt like standing at the edge of an abyss. I tried to speak, to ask how he knew, but the words tangled on my tongue as another shift in the air made the hairs on my arms rise, and without warning, the shadows behind him stirred. Kale emerged from between the trees, not silently disappearing this time, but stepping into plain view, his massive wolf form absorbing light like a living eclipse, his single red eye glowing brighter than I had ever seen, not with anger but with something far more complex, urgency. The pack gasped, stumbling back, some shifting in instinctive defense, others frozen in shock, for no rogue wolf had ever approached the village openly, let alone walked toward an alpha with no sign of aggression. Yet Kale did not bare teeth or lower his head, he only stopped beside the powerful stranger, his gaze tethered to mine as if delivering a message he could no longer allow me to ignore. The alpha glanced at him but spoke to me, his voice threaded with quiet gravity. "You've been waiting for answers you didn't know you were seeking. I have come because the forest finally allowed me to." His words struck something inside me I didn't want to acknowledge, because they felt true in a way truth shouldn't feel, inevitable, heavy, familiar. My heartbeat pounded against my ribs, confused and desperate for clarity, but before the alpha could speak again, Kale shifted, not into human form but into movement, stepping closer until his shadow merged with mine, the soft rumble in his chest vibrating through the air as he lowered his head. Then, for the first time, he spoke, not with a human voice, but with a voice that reached through sound and instinct, a message that entered me like lightning striking water, sharp and undeniable. "Your world stands on a lie." The words echoed inside me, reverberating in my bones, scattering my thoughts into fragments, and when the last syllable faded, the air fell utterly still, the forest listening, the sky holding its breath, the pack trembling at the weight of a truth they couldn't fully hear. I staggered back, gripping my cloak as though the fabric could anchor me to the ground, but nothing felt solid anymore. Kale's presence, the stranger's arrival, the charged air, the dreams, the feather, the early moonflowers. The whispers in the wind, everything aligned in a way that made my carefully ordered life seem suddenly fragile. What does that mean? I managed to whisper, but the Alpha only watched me with eyes full of unspoken knowledge, his silence more revealing than any explanation. Kale's gaze burned into me, not unkindly but insistently, as though urging me to see what had been before me all along. And the longer I held that red stare, the more memories rose, my childhood lessons, the stories of our pack's founding, the sacred traditions we were told never to question, the rules passed down as unshakable truth, and for the first time in my life, they felt thin, like parchment stretched too tight over something much larger, much darker, much older than I had ever been allowed to imagine. The Alpha finally spoke again, his voice a low murmur that seemed to resonate with the earth beneath our feet. You were taught a version of destiny, not the real one. His words settled over me like cold rain, sinking deep, washing away the certainty I had clung to since birth. Around us, the pack exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared speak, no one dared interrupt. As if something primal warned them that this moment was larger than their fear, Kale stepped back, but his eye never left mine, and in that unwavering stare I felt the truth of his message, not a threat, not a warning, but a revelation waiting to be uncovered. The Alpha extended his hand. Slightly, not touching me, just letting his presence brush the space between us, and with that simple gesture, my heartbeat shifted again, deepening into something I didn't yet understand but felt drawn toward in ways that terrified me. The path ahead was never meant to begin at your ceremony, he said softly. It began long before that, before you were born. The world tilted, my breath catching as cold realization slid down my spine, because for the first time, I allowed myself to question something I had never dared to touch, the idea that my life, my role, my destiny, everything I believed defined me, might have been shaped not by truth but by convenience, by control, or by fear. And as the Alpha's gaze held mine, steady and knowing, Kale's presence pressing like a silent vow at my side, a single, devastating thought formed in the back of my mind. Shattering the foundation I once trusted without question, what if everything I believed about who I was meant to become, and what my pack had taught me, was wrong? I woke before dawn, long before the rest of the pack stirred, with the lingering ache of yesterday's revelations knotting tightly beneath my ribs, and as I lay there staring at the wooden beams above me I could almost feel the weight of unspoken truths pressing down like a gathering storm, the kind that begins with a single trembling leaf and ends with the sky tearing open. Everything around me felt strangely disjointed, as if the world had shifted half an inch in the night and left me scrambling to understand where I now stood. Yet even in that disorientation I sensed the echo of someone's presence watching from far beyond the ordinary boundaries of thought, a presence that was both comforting and alarming. Like standing close to a fire whose warmth could turn to devastation if I leaned too far, the pack moved differently that morning, their eyes a little too cautious, their steps a little too quiet, their words layered with things they didn't dare say. And as I walked among them with a forced steadiness in my breathing I could tell they felt the strain inside me, the doubts I tried to bury, the questions no one could answer without risking tearing open wounds we all pretended were healed. Because trust, once shaken, left tremors even in the most loyal hearts. The Alpha kept his distance yet watched me with a conflicted intensity that made my chest tighten, for I wanted to believe him, to trust that his oath to protect me wasn't tangled in secrets. But every time I caught his gaze I saw something guarded flicker behind his eyes, something that mirrored the fear whispering through my own thoughts, and though he reached out once, just a small gesture, a hand hovering near mine, the moment vanished before contact, like the last warmth from a dying ember. Dreams had followed me into waking hours, dreams of paths splitting in the moonlight, of choices that felt heavier than destiny should ever demand, dreams in which Kale's glowing red eye burned through the darkness as though he alone could see the consequences waiting for me on either side, and even as I tried to dismiss them as imagination, I could still feel the echo of his silent warning reverberating through me like a drumbeat beneath the earth. When I slipped away from the pack momentarily, needing air, needing space to breathe without pretending everything was fine, the wind shifted with a soft, unnatural hush, and in the tree line ahead I sensed him, Kale, not emerging, not speaking, but standing so close that the air between us felt charged with meaning, as though destiny itself was inhaling slowly behind my shoulder, waiting for my next step. He didn't move, not even when a faint glow pulsed from his left eye, casting a thin line of crimson light across the fallen leaves in front of me like a path I wasn't yet brave enough to walk, and though he said nothing, his silence pressed against my heart harder than any spoken warning could, urging me toward a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The Alpha found me moments later, breath uneven as if he had been searching frantically, but when he followed my gaze into the woods he saw nothing, and the confusion on his face struck me harder than I expected, because it confirmed something I had feared for days, that whatever force was guiding me, whatever Cale represented, this path was one I might have to walk alone, and that realization hollowed something inside me. The Alpha tried again to reach for me, his voice soft but trembling with restraint, offering explanations he wasn't sure I believed and promises he wasn't sure he could keep, and though part of me wanted to lean into him, to trust him as I once had without hesitation, another part recoiled with the uncertainty of someone who has seen the first cracks in a foundation they once believed unbreakable. The moment stretched painfully, the air thick with all we didn't say, and then, before I could decide whether to step closer or step away, a distant howl rolled through the forest, low, mournful, and threaded with a strange resonance that made both our hearts stutter, and in that sound I felt a pull, a calling, something ancient and gentle yet impossibly firm, as if destiny itself had reached out and closed its hand around mine. The Alpha stiffened, recognizing the shift, but I already knew what the howl meant, that another choice was being demanded of me, one that would test not just my loyalty or my courage, but the very truth of who I was becoming. I whispered that I needed time, that I needed space to understand what was happening inside me, and though his face tightened with pain he nodded, stepping back even though every instinct in him begged to anchor me in place, and that small step backward felt like a fracture forming between us, soft, subtle, but deep enough to change the shape of everything. As I turned and walked toward the sound echoing through the trees, knowing I might not return the same, I could feel Cale's presence moving parallel to me, unseen but undeniably near, like a shadow bound to my heartbeat, and with every step the quiet truth pressed harder against my thoughts. To protect the pack, to protect myself, I might have to let go of something, or someone, I wasn't ready to lose. And though my throat tightened painfully, I kept walking, because some storms don't wait for courage, they drag you into the center before you realize you're already standing in the place where everything must break to become something new. I walked deeper into the forest than I had ever dared go before, my breath steady but weighted with the unspoken truths of the days behind me. And though the trees closed in like ancient watchmen guarding secrets older than our pack's history, I felt no fear now, only a strange, rising certainty that every step I took was stitching me closer to the person I was meant to become, the Luna I had been too hesitant, too obedient, too sheltered to see within myself. The howl that had summoned me softened into silence, replaced by a low hum in the earth beneath my feet, as if the land itself recognized my arrival, and for a moment I simply stood still, letting the quiet wrap around me like a cloak as the memories of this journey flickered through my mind. Small moments that had once seemed insignificant but now glowed with meaning, the uneasy stillness in the air weeks ago, the shifting patterns of the wind, the dreams that had threaded themselves into my mind with impossible clarity. The silent warnings left at dawn like footprints of fate, and above all, the unchanging red glow that had followed me through shadow and moonlight. I felt him before I saw him, the way the air thickened slightly, the way the leaves rustled despite the lack of wind. And when I turned, Cale stepped out from behind a cluster of dark pines, not fully revealed, not offering a single sound, but present in a way that rooted me to the forest floor as if I had been waiting for this exact moment without even knowing it. His wolf form towered with quiet strength, the dark fur along his spine shifting like ripples of night, and his left eye burned with that unmistakable crimson light that had haunted me, guided me, protected me, and unsettled me in equal measure. Yet this time there was something new in that glow, something softer, almost sorrowful, as though he understood that this meeting was both an ending and a beginning. I whispered his name even though I knew he would not answer, and as his gaze held mine I sensed a flood of unspoken truths passing between us. How long he had been watching over our pack, how many destinies he had nudged into alignment with nothing more than a silent presence, how many times he had kept danger at bay without ever being seen or thanked, and how deeply my own path had been shaped by his choice to intervene the night I broke tradition to help a stranger. A moment that now felt like the thread that had unraveled and rewoven my entire life. He lowered his head ever so slightly as if acknowledging the storm I had weathered, and I felt a warmth spread across my chest, a quiet affirmation that the doubts which had plagued me, about my strength, my purpose, my right to stand among leaders and legends, had been unnecessary shadows masking the truth that had always been within me. I breathed deeply, and in that breath I felt myself step fully into the role I had once feared, not just Luna by title or by bond, but Luna by destiny, chosen not because I followed rules but because I chose compassion even when it cost me certainty. Kale turned then, his massive form moving with the fluid, soundless grace that made him feel more myth than flesh, and he approached a fallen tree split cleanly down the center, its bark etched with strange, swirling patterns I was certain had not been there the day before. With a slow, deliberate motion, he touched his paw to the earth, and the marks along the bark shimmered faintly, glowing red for a heartbeat before fading back to darkness, and though I didn't understand the meaning, I sensed it was a symbol, an oath left behind, a final message for those meant to follow the path after me, or perhaps a record of the moment when my fate turned irrevocably towards something greater. I wanted to ask him what it meant, to demand answers about the lingering mysteries, the shifting winds, the hidden dangers he had hinted at, the lie he had warned me about, but something inside me already knew he would not speak, for his purpose had never been to give clarity but to reveal strength, and the truth I sought was one I would have to uncover myself. The forest darkened for a moment as a cloud drifted across the moon, and when the silver light returned, Kale stepped back, his glowing eye dimming just slightly, not from weakness but from the quiet acceptance of a chapter closing, and as he looked at me one final time I felt a strange mix of loss and gratitude surge through me, powerful enough to sting my eyes though no tears fell. He turned toward the deeper woods, a place where no pack member ventured, and with a final flicker of crimson light he slipped into the shadows so seamlessly that it felt as if he had dissolved into the very air, leaving behind only the faintest warmth where he had stood, a reminder that some guardians are never meant to stay, only to guide. The wind rose suddenly, sweeping through the clearing and lifting my hair from my shoulders, and in that gust I sensed his farewell, not spoken, not seen, but felt in the quiet place where intuition meets destiny, a whisper promising that our paths were not severed, merely diverging until the next storm required the presence of a red-eyed legend. I stood there for a long while, listening to the forest breathe around me as dawn crept gently across the horizon, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds, and as the first rays touched the treetops I felt something inside me settle, a deep, steady calm replacing the turmoil that had followed me for days. Everything was not solved, not certain, not safe, but I had changed, and with that change came a clarity that steadied my heartbeat. Kale's guidance had not been about protecting me from the world, but preparing me to stand in it. A distant howl rose then, long and low, threaded with a resonance that made my skin prickle, and when I turned toward the sound I saw not a figure, not a wolf, but a thin shimmer of red light pulsing between the trees, fading slowly like the last ember of a wildfire surrendering to dawn. It flickered once, twice, and then disappeared completely into the soft glow of morning, leaving behind a silence so gentle it felt like a blessing, a promise that this was not the end but merely the close of the first tale in a far greater saga that had only just begun. Step into a breathtaking alpha wolf dark fantasy where destiny, mystery, and supernatural forces collide. This cinematic Luna POV werewolf story follows a young Luna whose life changes forever when she breaks pack tradition to help a stranger, and the Alpha King comes searching for her. As eerie howls echo across the forest and shadows move where they shouldn't, a legendary rogue wolf with a glowing red eye, Kale, emerges from the darkness. His silent warnings, hidden symbols, and mysterious presence twist fate in unexpected ways, pulling the Luna toward a powerful truth about her pack destiny. If you love paranormal stories, supernatural wolf lore, alpha wolf romance without explicit content, and dark fantasy mysteries, this episode will draw you in with emotional storytelling, atmospheric world building, and epic cinematic tension. Journey into a world where every choice matters, every shadow hides a secret, and every howl hints at the future.